Hi everyone, happy Monday. I am here today in this mermaid wig, and it really is a mermaid wig. Look at that, it's so long. I think I'm going to cut it so that it's more practical and manageable, but today it's going to remain this length because we do have a mermaid book in this pile, and I thought that that seemed pretty apt. So today I'm here to talk to you about books that I'm really excited about, books that I have bought recently, books that I have been sent for review. Everything that I mention will be listed in the description box down below. There are some gems here, or at least some books that I am hoping are going to be gems when I get to them, because of course sometimes we just never know and we get it wrong, but fingers crossed, all of the fingers crossed. Let's just get into it because we've got quite a few to get through. The first book that I have on this pile has a terrible cover. This is Claudia Pinero's Thursday Night Widows, which is translated from the Spanish by Miranda France. And I adored Eleanor Knows, which I read last month, and it wasn't a crime book, but it had crime-solving elements in it, but Claudia Pinero normally does write crime, so I thought I would check out one of her actual crime books. I think it's going to be very different. She is an Argentinian author, and this is set in a gated community, so we have a limited list of suspects, which is always something that I enjoy. And the blurb also says that this book eerily foreshadowed a criminal case that generated a scandal. So that also sounds absolutely fascinating. Another crime book that I picked up is this one because everyone's been reading it. I'm sure that you have noticed. This is The Appeal by Janice Hallett. It was on lots of people's best of 2021 lists at the end of last year or the beginning of this year. This is a murder mystery, and everything is told via letters, texts and emails, and you are invited to try and solve it as you read all of these clues, and that just sounds like a fun time. It's a beast of a book, but I think from what I've heard from other people, it's one that you tend to whiz through, and people have compared it to Agatha Christie and all of that stuff. The mermaid book in question is this one here, which I'm currently reading. It's called The Secret of Haven Point by Lisette Auton, and it feels like Lisette sat down and thought, what book would Jen like to read, because I'm going to write that, which is just a lovely, lovely feeling. Obviously, that's not what she did, and we just have very similar interests, but I appreciate it nonetheless. So Lisette is from the Northeast, like me. She is a disabled author, like me, and this is a middle grade book about a group of disabled kids who live in a lighthouse at Marsden Rock along the Leas, and they call themselves the Wrecklings. They steal things from local ships with the help of mermaids. They are looked after by a man called Captain, who is the lighthouse keeper, who has kittens that live in his beard, and it is just honestly warming my soul. There is a section at the beginning before the book even starts talking about the importance of language surrounding disability, and I just thought that was great. Yes, I'll speak about it in my end of month wrap up, but for now I just wanted to preempt the recommendation because it's just making me warm and fuzzy. A book that I had been considering picking up because lots of you have recommended it to me, but it made me feel kind of uneasy. That is Chouette by Claire Oshetsky, and it's got a quote on the front by Rumina Lamb, who I love. A marvel, its language a joy, its imagination dizzying, it's a truly exhilarating read. And I don't know when I'm going to read this. I would like to, but it is about, obviously I would like to, I purchased it, but it's about a woman who gives birth to an owl, and then it's about how society's really not okay with that, and she's trying to protect it, and it's a metaphor for disability, and it's a topic, that specific topic is difficult for me to read, and I don't know how it's going to be handled, which makes me a little bit nervous because I really like extended metaphors and all of that stuff, but they can be really clumsy too, and not that helpful. So I don't know if it's going to be the full-on magical realism completely takes you away from the metaphor that it's playing around with, or if it's going to hit home a bit stronger than that. But I have heard great things about the writing, so I will approach it with caution and hope. Then I bought The Lessons by Naomi Alderman, and I bought this because I read, what was it called, English Monsters by James Scudamore, which I thought was going to be like The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and I didn't enjoy it. This one also gives me Secret History vibes. I just kind of want to find a book that I can really recommend confidently to people, because I'm asked so often what book I would recommend that's similar to The Secret History, and I have yet to really find one. I really loved her book Disobedience, which was a queer love story tied up in religion. I thought was great. I didn't enjoy The Power, so I'm hoping this is going to be the disobedience kind of book for me. It says, James, always the outsider, enters Oxford, high seat of privilege, wealth and ambition. There he meets Mark Winters, heartbreakingly rich and piteously cruel, and the fellow students he has gathered around him. The nights and many of the days become one long party. I'm guessing that this is more closely related to Brideshead Revisited, but I'm going to read it and find out. Another book that I've purchased in the hope that this is going to be what I hoped another book was going to be, which didn't end up being the case, which is a very convoluted sentence. Nightshift by Kiare Ladner. Essentially, I bought and read Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller years and years and years and years and years ago, and absolutely fell in love with it. It's this weird, twisted, stalkery, one-sided romantic relationship between two women, and I have been trying to find something similar for a really long time, and I had hoped that The Woman in the Purple Skirt that I read last year was going to be the book that kind of stepped into that book's shoes. It was not. It didn't get dark enough quick enough, and I don't know what that says about me, but here we are. I have higher hopes for this one, which is about a woman called Maggie who moves to London from South Africa and meets a Belgian woman called Sabine and kind of falls in love with her in a obsessive, I want to be you kind of way. So she changes everything about her life so that she can be with her as much as possible, on the same shifts with her at work, and I think it gets really dark and twisted, and that's what I would like. So fingers crossed. Another dark and twisted book. This is a proof that I've been sent by Darnielle, who wrote Wolf in a White Van, which I've had on my shelf for years and I need to read. This is called Devil House. This is coming out in April, and it's about a true crime writer. So he goes to a creepy old house called the Devil's House where murders occurred in the 1980s, and he's doing research, and obviously something awful starts to happen while he's there. It's a classic setup for a book, but that's because that setup works. As that one was approved, let me show you other proofs on this pile. So this is coming out in April, I think, no, June, from Granta, and it's called The Seaplane on Final Approach by Rebecca Rukeyser. And I have to admit that the reason that I'm intrigued by this one mainly is because I recently watched White Lotus, and I referenced that with regard to another book too, but since watching that, I am now just desperate to read books about morally ambiguous characters who work in hotels and do terrible things. So this is about a woman called Mira. It's set in Alaska on a small remote island. She works at a lodge. She is a baker and housekeeper. And it says behind the scenes, she is building a working theory of what constitutes sleaze. And lots of strange things, I think, start happening. It says that it is daring and psychologically razor sharp. So there we go, that one is going on the pile. I've been sent 3 books in translation for review. This is a collection of poems called Distant Transit by Maja Haderlap, translated from the German by Tess Lewis. And even the blurb sounds poetic. It says, language comes to Maja as a confidant, but it flies out her face like a flock of birds. The other 2 books in translation are short story collections. This is Moldy Strawberries, which is a great title, by Fernando, Abreu, translated from the Portuguese by Bruna Dandas Labato. This is set in Brazil in the 1980s around the AIDS epidemic. So it's about men meeting each other in clubs. It is about office friendships. It is about failed revolutionaries, poets and artists who face threats at every turn. And then this is by Ida Jessen. It's called A Postcard for Annie, translated from the Danish by Martin Aitken. And Martin Aitken translates Daughter Nors. I think I've definitely read books that he has translated before. The blurb really called to me, especially this bit where it says that one of the stories is about young sisters wandering through their neighborhood at night under telephone lines glazed with ice, over pavements that resemble the darkest glass, unaware of the violence unfolding in a nearby grocery store. I've been sent a finished copy of Tom de Freston's book Wreck, which is out next month. It's a memoir about his relationship with art, but specifically one painting, and also tracking the history of that painting and how that parallels with his own family history. And I think he's also talking about the time last year or the year before when his art studio burnt down. So this is out in March. Sorry, my camera cut out there because my card was full. The final book that's been sent to me by publishers before we move on to a few other ones that I've purchased myself. This is The Marsh House by Zoe Somerville, and I haven't read the blurb in depth because it is part ghost story, part part ghost story, part mystery thriller, and I don't really want to know much about it, but it's about two women, I think one in the 1930s and one in the 1960s, who both go to this house and experience strange things. And that's all I want to know before going into it. It's at the beginning of March. Oh, sorry, there is one more book that's been sent to me by a publisher, and it's this anthology here called Artificial Divide by Robert Kingett and Randy Lacey. This is a collection of short stories, and they are all by blind and visually impaired people. It says, step into a world of rogue screen readers, braille in fantasy worlds, a friend meeting an acquaintance after several years, and more. This Own Voices anthology features fiction by blind and visually impaired authors, showing readers how they thrive, hurt, get revenge, outsmart bullies, or go on epic adventures. So excited about that, and also it is in large print too, which is just wonderful. Okay, a few other books that I've picked up myself. This is Hiromi Kawakami's Strange Weather in Tokyo, which I swear I used to own, and I have no idea where it has gone. I tried to find it the other day, I couldn't find it. Maybe it got lost when we moved a couple of years ago. It's translated from the Japanese by Alison Markham-Powell. I just love Hiromi Kawakami, and this is one of the books of hers that I haven't read. So I picked it up, it's going on my shelf. Another book in translation, and I'm sorry if you can hear my neighbour aggressively using her leaf blower. This is Happy Stories Mostly by Norman Erikson Pasirabu, and it's translated from the Indonesian by Tiffany Zhao. This is a collection of queer stories. It says that they queer the norm. It is inspired by Simone Weil's concept of decreation, and these tales put queer characters in situations and plots conventionally filled by hetero characters. The stories talk to each other, echo phrases and themes, and even shards of stories within other stories, which I enjoy. I enjoy interconnected short stories. And another work in translation, this is Earth Eater by Dolores Reyes, which is translated from the Spanish by Julia Sanchez. I saw Holly talk about this over on her Patreon, Holly Exley, whose channel I'll link down below, and it sounded really intriguing. It's set in Argentina, and it's about a woman who has a compulsion to eat soil, and through eating the soil she can determine certain things. So it gives her visions of murdered and disappeared people and the secrets of strangers that she would rather not know. That sounds very intriguing to me. This next one I bought because it was giving me Atesha Moshfegh vibes, and I don't even know if that is fair, because it may just be the cover more than anything else, but it's called Indelicacy by Amina Kane, and it's set in an undefined era and an unnamed place, and it's about a cleaning woman at a museum of art who longs to do more than just dust. She wants to be a writer, so she escapes her lot by marrying a rich man, but having gained a husband, a house and high society, she finds that her life of privilege is no less constrained. It says that it's reminiscent of a lost Victorian classic in miniature. It is a ghost story without a ghost, a fable without a moral, and an exploration of the barriers faced by women in both life and literature. I purchased one of the Rialto's new pamphlets. This is called The Sea Turned Thick as Honey by Holly Singlehurst. I'd read some of her poetry and really enjoyed it, so I decided to pick up her collection. I think it was this poem that I read that intrigued me the most, called Blue Water. I saw you by the water, by the blue water, you were washing your bones. I really enjoyed that opening to that poem. And then I bought two books by Polly Atkin, whose poetry I also love. So I bought her collection Much with Body, which came out last year. She is a disabled poet. I love her writing. And then I bought this non-fiction book that she's written called Recovering Dorothy, The Hidden Life of Dorothy Wordsworth. Dorothy is the sister of William Wordsworth. She was also a writer in her own right. And the last 20 years of her life, she remained inside her house due to illness. So this is re-examining her life through the perspective of her illness, and it allows Dorothy Wordsworth to step out from her brother's shadow and back into her own life story. So that's quite a few books to add to the shelves. I would love to know if you have read any of these, or if you are intrigued by any of them, or would like to get to the newer releases when they are released later this year. I hope that you are all having a good start to the week. If you're new to my channel and would like to subscribe, that would be lovely. If you like my content and would like to support me on Patreon, that is also very kind. Links to everything in the description box down below. I hope you're having a great start to the week, and I will speak to you very soon. Sending love. Bye.